Hi everybody, so I've just finished Stalker Call of Pripyat, so it's time for my review, because I guess loads of people will be interested in the original Stalker series because of the imminent release of Stalker 2. Well, it's imminent at the time of recording this video. It might already be out by the time you watch this, so maybe you've played some of Stalker 2 and like, I enjoyed that, I want to go back and look at the original games. And so, is Stalker Call of Pripyat any good? Let's take a step back first, though, for people who don't really know much about the Stalker games. You know, what type of game is it? Well, Stalker Call of Pripyat, it's a single-player, story-based, open-world, post-apocalyptic shooter adventure game, I guess we'd say. And I've been playing it on Xbox, and it's part of the kind of the remastered Stalker Trilogy that you can get on console now. And obviously, you can still buy it on PC and things like that. And Call of Pripyat is the third part of the trilogy. So I guess before we go any further, I should say that if you're thinking about playing the original trilogy, because you want to get into the lore and the history of Stalker, although, as I'll describe in a bit, Call of Pripyat is the most polished game in the original trilogy, you should really start with Shadow of Chernobyl. Because Shadow of Chernobyl contains the core locations and the core characters that are really important to the Stalker franchise, and it remains to see which of those characters will pop up in Stalker 2. But I think you should always really start with Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, even though it's arguable that in terms of game mechanics and the game engine, it's the weakest of the trilogy. So anyway, you've always got to remember with all of these games that they're really old. They originally came out from 2007 to 2009, and the remastered console versions were done, I think, last year. I think it was in 2022 or early part of 2023. And they've improved some parts of the game, a little bit of the UI. They've improved sort of the way it looks a little bit and got rid of lots of the bugs. If you're playing on PC, I understand that Call of Pripyat actually doesn't really need any of the quality of life mods that the other two games have. You can just play it vanilla and it'll be fine. As far as the trilogy goes, the improvements that the devs made for this game was it has a little bit of a better UI and inventory. It looks a little bit better, although the Stalker games, for their time, were known for looking really good. Now, it might not look that great today, but you know they did look really good. One thing I would say is that if you do play all of the games after Shadow of Chernobyl, the next two they feel a little bit like DLC. Maybe because they came out so fast after the original game, and the story is, well, you have Stalker Shadow of Chernobyl, where you play as a stalker, and then you have Stalker Clear Sky, which is actually set before Shadow of Chernobyl, where you play as a mercenary, and in this one where you play as a soldier. So they all came out one after the other, and in terms of the time scale in the Stalker lore, they're pretty quick. You know, you have Clear Sky, and then immediately after that you have Shadow of Chernobyl, and pretty much immediately after that you have Call of Pripyat. So I guess that kind of makes sense. They do feel like DLC. But when you start getting into them, the more you play into them, the more you get into it, you know, the difference is sort of, although subtle between the games, they are different things. So in, for example, Call of Pripyat, they drop the faction wars that we get in Clear Sky, but they add in, you've still got things like weapon crafting and repairing and leveling up as well. I say weapon crafting, it's really more weapon leveling up. Anyway, so the gameplay loop you get in all of the games is you kind of have these main quests that you've got to do to advance the story. Then you have lots of side quests, which are pretty fun, and often it's where you have the most fun in any game, I find, in the side quests that are optional. And then you have the exploring, or I guess you call the stalking bit. So a stalker in this world is someone who goes into the zone, and the zone is the exclusion zone around the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. So the idea is, just like in our timeline, there was an explosion, there was the accident, but in the Stalker world, what happened after that was there was sort of secret experiments were going on inside the exclusion zone, because scientists could do stuff without being snooped on. And then there was a second explosion, and you had this strange area where There's mutated animals. There's these anomalous zones that create these artifacts that have special powers that are worth a lot of money. And these artifacts might do things like give you resistance against radiation, or give you more health, or give you more strength, that sort of thing. And these are really valuable. So people would come into the zone to find their fame and fortune by getting hold of these artifacts and then selling them. But then you'd also get people like bandits who are trying to take advantage of them to steal it off, and you'd also get the military in there, and you'd also get sort of scientists and other people like that. So as you progress through the game, although yes there is a story, it's often wandering off and doing the side stuff and just doing the stalking bit where you're wandering off trying to find artifacts to sell. That is really cool as well. Now you're going to come across a lot of frustrations. In this game, the lack of fast travel in the early parts of the game can be a little bit odd, because you're thinking, well, how do I get from one area to the other? Lack of money as well, until you get a better detector and actually can start finding a lot of the artifacts. And once you can start finding and selling them, you can make loads and loads of money, and it's not a problem at all. As with all of the Stalker games, the enemies can be bullet sponges, and the gunplay, although fun and good, it does have this odd strafing mechanic, whereby if you're aiming down sight and you strafe from side to side, the gun kind of sways. But the way that you get around that is you just ADS. You don't ADS, you just hip fire. You can still hit enemies, so that's pretty good. The AI is just smart enough to be a threat when there's a number of them, but not really clever to make it frustrating. The inventory management system, in terms of having to think about the weight that you're carrying, is actually quite good. I quite enjoy that. So you have to make tactical choices about which sort of weapons and which sort of ammunition you want to take with you. But the big thing about all of these games is the atmosphere. It feels like a world almost in a way that DayZ does. They've done a lot of work in creating this atmosphere, and I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it with the sounds and the world and the story, which is interesting. And I would have to say that for me, if you're interested in Stalker, especially if you're coming from something like DayZ or Metro, then this really is a must play. Well, the Stalker OG Trilogy is a must play, because it's such an important foundation for so many modern games. Not that that should be the reason you're playing, because they're good games in their own right as well. And I think these older games, they come from an era where games didn't really hold your hand as much. There's not map markers everywhere. There's not tips coming up saying, "Oh, do this next," or do that next. You're going to have to look at a guide online every now and again. But in general, you can kind of work out what you've got to do when you're in a particular situation. And you've got these fun shooter mechanics, I think. I think if you can put your prejudice about old games to one side, you'll have a really good time with Call of Pripyat. I think it's highly recommended. Remember, I would say buy the trilogy on console when it goes on sale, or get it very cheap on PC, and play Shadow of Chernobyl first. You can probably skip Clear Sky. Play it at some point when you get enough time, and then go on to Call of Pripyat, and it's very, very cool. And one thing that I've had in common with all of these games is that you play them, and although maybe sometimes during the game you're wanting to get to the end, once you're finished, you're like, oh, I want to go back in again. I want to explore all those places that I didn't visit. I want to do those quests and those side quests that I didn't finish. And that, for me, that's a massive tick for any single player game. The fact that you want to go back, and I want to go back in and try it again. So there we go. Stalker Call of Pripyat. Really, really good. Excellent part of the trilogy. Probably, although it's the most polished one in terms of a video game, I've got to say that Shadow of Chernobyl is probably my favourite, because it's the one where you first get introduced to the world of the zone and learn about it. But Call of Pripyat is very good indeed, and I highly recommend it. Anyway, that's enough from me. What do you think? Put your questions and comments down below, and of course I'll see you again soon.